everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition, and we're broadcasting from beautiful Irvine, California, and from beautiful Moscow, Idaho. Andrew Crapuchettes, welcome back to the show. Red balloons on fire. Happy to have you with me today.
No, man, Mark, it's been a while. It's really nice to see you. It's exciting to talk about what's happening in the world. And yes, Red Balloon continues to grow. We're solving problems for employers. It's exciting. I love to watch your show, all that you're doing for the conservative world. So it's fun to talk to you.
Well, let's dive right into it, Andrew. Listen, I'm somewhat perplexed here, okay? The president flew to Israel. I give him a lot of an A for effort, certainly. He represents the United States. I'm not critical of anything he did, but, you know, he did pledge $100 million of our taxpayers' dollars. I know he wants to give it to the innocent Palestinian people. You and I know it doesn't always end up that way. I mean, if he bought supplies and gave them to Egypt, and Egypt brought them in through the gateway there at Rafah Crossing, that'd be one thing, but it never gets distributed that way. So I have a big concern about that. Egypt's bringing 20 truckloads of humanitarian aid in, but the bigger picture is, what has this, I mean, I saw the headlines, I saw the talks. Give me your thoughts on it. I've got a little uneasiness in it, can't put my finger on it, and I'm not going to criticize the president for his efforts, because we don't criticize just for the sake of criticism on this show. But Andrew, something's eating at me, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah, why does this bother you? Well, it's interesting. So New York Times today actually had an article talking about how Hamas, and, you know, when I say Hamas, and, you know, not necessarily Hamas and Palestinians are not necessarily the same thing. But Hamas, the group, has been funded through humanitarian aid to the Middle East. And that was not only just coming from the U.S., it was coming even from Israel, who were trying to bring humanitarian aid. And Hamas has been very good at kind of siphoning off, stealing, or somehow sequestering those funds to be able to do things that we don't want them to be doing. So I think that's part of what we're dealing with, and particularly when you get a number this big, when you talk about $100 million, I mean, the possibility of spending $100 million well, without the infrastructure, without the right people in place, and just like, hey, here's $100 million. It's kind of like giving your kid a gift card for $10,000 to the sporting goods store. They're not going to spend that wisely. You know, they're going to have all kinds of stuff they don't need. And so, unfortunately, when you get to the law of big numbers, you're going to have a significant amount of waste. You're going to have a significant amount of just fraud built into those numbers. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the U.S. is in an interesting spot right now, right? President Biden was interviewed, and they're like, hey, can we afford to do all this? I don't remember which show it was, Dateline or something like that. And he's like, well, we're America. We can afford to do all this stuff. We're the most powerful nation in the history of the world. And while that is true, and I am a true American patriot all the way through, the issue is there are limited resources. You only have so much money. So the other way I want to answer this question is we do an interesting survey of a lot of businesses here at Red Balloon. So this is a joint project of Red Balloon and Public Square. For those who don't know Public Square, publicsq.com, you should go check it out. So we have surveyed all of our businesses and all of their businesses to ask them what they think about things like inflation and Ukraine and Israel, but also about their business and the economy and politics. And it is fascinating. So you can find more information on this at redballoon.org/freedom economy. But pertinent to this question, we asked businesses about kind of DC spending. And basically what they said is DC is completely out of touch with the small business needs in America today. Basically, according to this Freedom Economy Index, small businesses, 97% of respondents. So 97%. And remember, we can't get 97% of Americans to agree to anything,
I know.
Right? But 97% of these tens of thousands of businesses, respondents, say they believe that there is no one in DC, whether Congress, Republican, Democrat, president, whatever, no one in DC will ever balance the budget. Just let that settle in. So 97% of these Americans, these true patriot Americans, believe that no one in DC will ever balance the budget. And I think that's what we're struggling with, is where's that $100 million coming from?
Right.
It's coming from you and I, who are working our tails off, trying to build our businesses, feed our family, support our communities. And all of a sudden that money has to come from somewhere. And small businesses, most of America, don't believe that DC will ever balance the budget, and therefore is totally out of touch with the grapple that you and I have of how do we balance the budget? How do we make profit? So I think that's probably, so those two things is kind of what I think is the struggle right now, is we know money at that scale is going to be wasted or sequestered for bad things. And we need to get our own financial house in order before we start giving too much money to other people.
Well, I heard Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, speaking at the Economic Club of New York earlier today. And, he said, look, at our current situation, we can manage the debt. I happen to have a slight disagreement about that, but as interest rates tick up, the expense of that debt goes up on a daily basis. But Powell said this, he says, everyone knows it's not sustainable. And to your point, last time we had a balanced budget in this country, I think was 1997 under the Clinton administration.
Right.
I think that was 96, 97, somewhere around then. So folks, it's been a generation plus since we had a balanced budget. And again, Republicans are complicit in it. I don't want to give them a pass on this.
100%.
Because frankly, and look, everyone blames COVID. I get that. But under President Trump and under President Biden, let's see, that's 7 years worth of presidency, $12 trillion, the deficit, Andrew's gone up. I might be off a little, 12, 13 trillion. We're currently running $1.5 trillion deficits with an economy, folks, that shock of all shock is going to grow over 4% this quarter.
Right.
And Andrew, I was doing a calculation when you were talking. This basically works out to $50 per Palestinian.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like giving it, that's what it is, $100 million, $2 million.
Man, woman, and child. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. So, I mean, my point, if you're going to, quote, buy food, water, things, gasoline, things like that, as long as the supplies can be bought, maybe given to Egypt, have Egypt man, that's one thing. But to write I don't know how they're dispersing this money, because, I mean, it just came out of the blue. But again, we're running massive deficits. And Joe Biden can say we're the greatest country in the world. I agree with that. But my God, when the Israelis are on the verge of a military operation, why are we doing this?
This is these small businesses. They believe that everybody in DC is out of touch. So here's some more findings. They said small business owners believe U.S. monetary and spending policies are harming the U.S. economy as a whole. This is not a shocker. 75% of respondents said the current Fed policy of interest rates being higher for longer will hurt their business, right? Because remember, if you're a large business and you're a publicly traded business, you're not as exposed to the debt markets in the same way. But if you're a small business, you're going to your local bank, you're going to your friends and family, you're going to investors and saying, hey, I need money so that I can operate my business. And so there's a disproportionate impact hurting small businesses when Powell makes an announcement like this. I also think it's really interesting that Biden said, and Janet Yellen basically came out and said, hey, inflation, we're in good shape, we're solved. And Powell's like, yeah, not so fast. Well, when we came out there with this Freedom Economy Index 2 weeks ago, the small businesses are like, no, inflation is still absolutely a problem no matter what Biden says. So Powell's just confirming what a lot of these small businesses are feeling. And what's cool about this is these are people who are they're in the trenches, right? They're just trying to run their welding shop or their ranch or whatever it is, and they want to just be free. And so 75% of them said that it's hurting their business. Another 53% said the number one thing that they would do right now to improve the U.S. economy is to stop runaway spending in D.C.
Yeah.
So over half of them say if there's only one thing that I can do right now is to stop spending in D.C. So the Fed is trying to respond to this inflation. They're trying to respond to, honestly, an enormous expansion of the monetary system in the U.S. because of the runaway spending in D.C. And in the process, they're hurting the small businesses that are the lifeblood of our country. So it's kind of, get you coming and get you going. And the primary thing that needs to be done is stop the runaway spending in D.C. And I think if we do that, while $100 million is a lot of money, it's kind of a rounding error for what we're doing in D.C. right now.
I know
which
that.
Is gross,
yeah.
Right?
I know that. Let me ask you a question related to the small businesses. A lot of economists are coming out saying, and people on Fox Business, CNBC, Bloomberg, et cetera, inflation's coming down, it's coming down, it's coming down. And Powell's saying, oh, yes, but hold on. It's not where we need it to be. And he's right. It is still running between 3 and 4%, and the Fed's goal is 2. But Andrew, I bet you in your surveys, wage inflation is a big concern among small business. I look at what's going on with big businesses, like what happened with Kaiser Health, what's ongoing with the auto companies right now, with the pay increases being asked for a year, government workers, the increases to certain cities. This has got to be a problem for small businesses.
It absolutely is, and I'm going to try and not do too much of a nerdy economic answer on this, although I like economics. Right. But when you look at price points, they talk about inflation. You remember the Fed only has control over the demand side. So they can say, here's the amount of money you have to buy stuff and to do things with. Therefore, they're going to control demand side. And so if people have less money, they're less willing to do projects, buy things. Therefore, there's less demand for those goods and services, and the price goes down, right? Supply and demand, those are the ways that prices are set. But the Fed only has control over the demand side, how much goods and services we want, how much we can consume. They do not have control over the supply side. So, for example, oil prices, we're all feeling this at the pump right now. The reality is that no matter what the Fed does with interest rates, it will not affect oil prices, because policy has a bigger impact on oil prices. If you're not allowed to use a pipeline to bring oil from Canada, if you're not allowed to pump it out of the ground, it is a supply-demand issue. So no matter how much demand there is, which the Fed can have some control over, there is a supply issue that our policies are saying we don't want to create oil. Therefore, it's only going to come from the Middle East. Therefore, OPEC is now controlling oil prices. And lo and behold, no matter what the Fed does, so they have one hand tied behind their back. They can only control half of the supply-demand curve. Policy has a much larger impact on the supply of goods and services than the Fed does. So, long economic answer. The reality is that small businesses don't believe those inflation numbers anymore. Just hard stop.
Well, and the inflation numbers, Andrew, they affect the lower and middle class. And I gotta tell you something. Mortgage rates ticked above 8% today. Okay. Yeah. So anybody building houses, condos, townhouses, and we're not even going to get into commercial real estate because there's big potential issues there. Powell even talked about that. But Andrew, when you see mortgage rates above 8% and wages going up, you're really hurting the lower and middle class Americans. And guess what? That I hate to shift it to politics, and we'll get back to Israel in a minute, but that is having a big effect on people's voting trends in the early preliminary polls.
For sure. No, and honestly, in our Freedom Economy Index, we asked people about the national debt, and we said, what do you think is going to be the long-term impacts? 88% said they believe it is an extreme threat to the U.S. safety, this national debt, right? It's not just a monetary policy. It's not just a financial policy. When you have runaway debt and you've gotten that debt from other countries, you start to have struggles to fund your military. And so these small businesses are aware of what's happening in the world, and they're saying, look, this is going to have a huge impact. And so, yes, transitioning to it absolutely is driving their behavior. They're thinking about voting this year and next year in the presidential election, because it's one thing to say, well, we've got a lot of debt that we're going to have to pay off in the future. It's another thing to say, because of our runaway spending on frivolous things and on humanitarian efforts that aren't actually going to humanitarian efforts, we can't fund our military to protect our nation. Well, that all of a sudden gets people's attention at a totally different level. And so that's what we're finding from our small businesses right now.
So I'm going to come back to that in just a minute, Andrew. We're going to take about a 1-minute break, folks. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk about Trump, Biden, and the effects of what's going on in the Middle East.
Hi, this is Sean Morgan, the host of the Sean Morgan Report on Fridays and the Director of Marketing at AMP News. We're now calling all Patriot business owners to advertise with us through commercials and interviews on our shows. We get 2 million collective views per month and reach an important demographic of 40 to 70-year-old patriotic buyers. If you would like to reach our audience with your product or service, simply email me, sean@ampnews.us, and it's also in the description box below. AMP viewers are potential loyal lifetime customers for your business. So let AMP produce a professional commercial for you. or get an opportunity to truly explain your business and its impact in an interview format. You could even reach our email list of Patriot subscribers. There are lots of options to engage with us. I'm offering free consultations to Patriot business owners for a limited time. So reach out today at the email below. Let's build that parallel economy together. Patriots supporting Patriots.
And I'm back with Andrew Crapuchettes. Andrew, I saw some real interesting polling that really ties into what you just said. In the battleground states, and folks, this is not a 50-state election. It's going to be about a 7-8 state election, maybe 9. But let's pick out 7 key states. Biden versus Trump, which is what it looks like it's going to be, despite a lot of people's opinions. Donald Trump is leading in 5 of those states, Biden in 2, and I'll give you the states breakdown. Trump's up in Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Biden's up in Nevada and Michigan. Now, I always think Pennsylvania could be fool's gold, but I'll accept the Bloomberg poll results. Not exactly a conservative organization. Bloomberg says, aggregately in these 7 states, Trump's up by 4, which is well outside the margin of error, plus or minus 1 point. Andrew, the most important issue was, guess what? The economy. Trump is beating Biden by 14 points. Bidenomics is not working. Second point, I want you to come back and comment on that. On international affairs, Trump's plus 11. Andrew, have at it. I mean, a 14-point gap on the economy. You and I know where elections are won and lost.
Absolutely. It's the economy, stupid. And I'm not calling you stupid, but or any of the listeners. Yeah. Well, and I'm going to point out one third one, and then I'm going to get back to those. So we actually, again, back to the Freedom Economy Index, we surveyed all these businesses and asked them about the Trump indictments, right? Because those were in the news. They're not as much in the news right now, but they're coming back, right? They're going to be jumping up and down on those. 65% of the small businesses of the lifeblood of our country, these businesses all over the country, 65% said they are more likely to vote for Trump because of the indictments, right? Not they were likely to vote for him and this didn't affect it. No, they're more likely to vote for him because they feel like this is a Department of Justice that is out of control and they are going after all of us. Trump's just in the way. That's the mindset of a lot of these people, right? Right, wrong, or not. That's the mindset of these people. And so those indictments have backfired. And a lot of middle America, blue collar America is like, no, that's our guy. He's a guy who's in a fight, which I think is really interesting. The economy is no surprise to me because it's interesting. If you look at the red state versus blue state, I think, Mark, we've talked about this before. Yeah. You have this great migration that's happening, this great sort that's happening all over the country. You've got conservatives moving to red states where the policies and the taxes and the regulation are more in line with their values, with their families' values. And you have people moving up to blue states whose policies and restrictions are more in line with their values. And so we now have this huge, giant experiment in the U.S. that is looking at, okay, which policies are going to win, which group of people are going to create more economic activity that's positive economic activity. And there is a clear winner. The red states right now are winning. You had the state of Florida in 1 year got $23 billion of new annual taxable income moving into their state. These are people who are talented, who are bringing their businesses, who are bringing their families and saying, you know what, I'm going to move somewhere where I can be free. And at that same time, New York lost $19 billion of annual taxable income. Well, when you have that kind of shift that's happening in the nation, you can now see that the red state Republican conservative economics are winning out because we have a scorecard. And so now you look back at the presidential election and you say, okay, now that we have a clear scorecard between red states and blue states, well, I would like the red state outcome at a national level. Ta-da! You end up with Donald Trump, who obviously is the front runner as a Republican. And look, there's some other great people there, DeSantis, Ramaswamy, some really interesting people in that race. But Trump is so far ahead. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure what.
When you're 30 points ahead, and people say, "Well, he's gone down 5 points." Yeah, he was 35, now he's 30. Listen, we have some great people on the Republican side, and the good news is they're all young, other than Trump. Okay, so we've got some very positive. Look, we're going to be broadcasting from the great state of Florida for the next 3 weeks. 800 people a day continue to move in the state. Listen, I got some humor earlier today when Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, there are so many illegals coming into Illinois, Chicago, from from the southern border, which is wide open, despite folks what they try to tell you. And he goes, tell them not to come to Illinois because the weather's horrible and it's cold. I got a kick out of that. Eric Adams has already talked about the problems New York City has. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just this experiment is going to bode well, because you're exactly right. It's going to crystallize in the 2024 election. Let's hope we have a fair election. We're giving it the benefit of the doubt, but points well taken, Andrew. And I got to tell you something. As the economy ebbs and flows, boy, I've never seen a president, honest to God, folks, with 4% economic growth whose people do not like his policies. No. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. All right, I want to go to a couple other oddities. Yeah. We don't often praise John Fetterman, Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania on this show, but God, I've got to address this. Again, folks, we cut through the propaganda, okay? And we've criticized him to no end for some of the stupid stuff he's done. He came out with a statement yesterday and he said, this is no time for the Israelis to have a ceasefire. My God, the left absolutely grilled this guy for stating the obvious.
Right.
When we get to a point where this is what's driving me crazy. Fetterman is like making common sense. Rashida Tlaib is out there supporting Palestine and supporting Hamas after the Israelis and the Palestinians confirmed it wasn't the Israeli rocket.
Right.
And then you have all these mushhead idiots on these campuses conducting die-ins, supporting Hamas. Who in their right mind supports the murderers? I'm flabbergasted by what I'm seeing. Andrew, yeah. I know you deal with these employers. The one good thing I've seen about this, a couple of law firms said, we're not hiring any of these people after they found out who these supporters were. Andrew, tie this into what's going on here in the economy in the U.S. and this absolute idiocy about supporting Hamas by a fringe part of the country.
No, it is crazy to me. Imagine a world after 9/11, the terrorists take down the two towers with those airplanes, and then having people in England or France do a huge protest. Right. Talking about how they support, ISIS, or we'd be like, what are you doing? Like, that would just be so offensive and out of bounds for them to do that kind of thing. And that's effectively what we're doing right here, right? And so I think that this is, again, it's bifurcating our economy, it's bifurcating our labor market, and these businesses who are saying, look, I don't want one of these political activists who clearly is not thinking clearly about what's happening in the world. They're just focused on some political, ideological thing. And do you want that person inside your workplace? You don't.
No.
Because they are going to cause havoc. And that's part of the reason redballoon.work's around, because businesses increasingly are saying, look, I don't want to hire a significant political activist into my business because they're not going to bring value. They're only going to bring chaos. And these Harvard grads, these Palestinian, protests, these Hamas protests. Shoot, you saw what happened in the Capitol. We have a Palestinian insurrection, and nobody's even talking about it.
Yeah, 3 people got arrested. 3.
Yeah, I don't know how they're getting away with that. We obviously have, I do know how they're getting away with it. The mainstream media has picked a side, and they picked a side for many, many years. And Americans, I think, took too long to realize that they were being fed propaganda by the mainstream media, by CNN, by MSNBC. Those people do not have our best interest in mind. They do not have America's best interest in mind. They are pushing a political agenda. And that's why things like the Schaftlein report are so important. We need to know where we can get information, cut through the propaganda, and get to a spot where we actually know what's going on in the world, because they are pushing an agenda. And if they're the only ones you're listening to, you're going to believe things that are simply not true. And unfortunately, I think a lot of those Harvard grads, a lot of these other organizations, they're believing those things. And so what's going to happen, though, is those people are going to increasingly realize the economic creator, the most productive people in our economy are not interested in that. They want to focus on good business. And that is not good business. And they're going to have trouble finding a job, even in this tight labor market right now.
And doesn't it amaze you that, a country like Egypt that's prosperous, a country like Jordan, who's prosperous.
Yeah.
Lebanon, which is, Beirut's a beautiful area. Nobody wants these people. And I'm saying, well, if nobody wants them, what's the redeeming quality? What's the redeeming value? Why is the entire world asphyxiated on 2 million people run by a terrorist organization? I'm asking that question. And frankly, when I find myself agreeing with John Fetterman,
I know, which is probably the first time ever.
I'm saying
honestly, when someone speaks the truth, we should agree with them,
yes.
Right? And that's the thing, is this is where, and I don't love what a lot of Republicans do. And, I'm a conservative, I'm a Christian, but I don't love it when people are like, well, I'm just going to pick sides at all costs, right? No, we should pick sides with the truth, not necessarily with a political party, right? And when we can do that, then our nation is going to be in a spot where we can actually have conversations. And this is what, I like about Vivek Ramaswamy, where he's happy to have a debate and a conversation with someone who's a totally political different. Like, I'm happy to say, John Fetterman had it right on that, and Kevin McCarthy had it wrong on that, or Nikki Haley had it wrong on that. Like, I don't need us to just say, well, I have an R by my voting status, therefore I have to agree with everything coming out of that party. No, for us to fix this nation to be in a better spot, we need to focus on the truth. We need to focus on what's right. And even if it costs us friends and family, which often it doesn't as much as we think it will, but it is a very, very important moment in America. If we don't recognize things that are true, if we don't agree with people on the other side of the aisle, we're in I think in a dangerous spot as a nation, and we need to get back to that.
Well, you couldn't have said it any better. And I got about a minute and a half left. Andrew, I want to tie in closing piece with the economy. 2 things. We got to get a speaker. Okay, it failed again with Jim Jordan. That didn't work. I got to tell you something. We got some people on our side. I think they're taking stupid pills. I just don't get it. Again, I like Jim Jordan. 20 people in the conference couldn't stomach it. 8 people took down what I thought, Kevin McCarthy. I wasn't in favor of that. Obviously, there was no backup plan. Andrew, in the last minute of this, we got to get a speaker. And what are the people that Red Balloon is talking to saying about the dysfunction? We can't blame the Democrats on our inability to get a speaker. That's not fair.
No, I think all of this should be a warning shot over all politicians' vows, because the reality is that most of America does not trust anybody in D.C. anymore. Red, left, blue, whatever. They don't trust any of them. They believe that they're focused on their own self-enrichment and their own policies. And redballoon.work is where employers go when they're tired of all the politics, when they just want to hire people who want to show up, do a good job, and focus on what made this nation great in the first place, which is freedom, meritocracy, and just joyfulness at work. So we need a speaker, but we also need politicians who don't care as much about themselves as they do about our country. And I don't see a lot of them right now, and hopefully we're going to get some soon.
Well, Andrew, thank you again for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to speak to you and the folks at Red Balloon. You're doing a great job, and God bless you. And and the best to your mother, who's got some illnesses that she's dealing with too, folks. So a little prayer for Andrew's mom. That'll do it for today. I'm going to close it out with this. A guy with 91 indictments would not be leading in a race unless something was wrong in Washington, D.C. So we'll leave it at that. Broadcasting from Florida next week. Stay safe. Stay safe with all this craziness going on in this country, around the world. We'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.
Hi, this is Sean Morgan, the host of the Sean Morgan Report on Fridays and the Director of Marketing at AMP News. We're now calling all Patriot business owners to advertise with us through commercials and interviews on our shows. We get 2 million collective views per month and reach an important demographic of 40 to 70-year-old patriotic buyers. If you would like to reach our audience with your product or service, simply email me, sean@ampnews.us, and it's also in the description box below. AMP viewers are potential loyal lifetime customers for your business. So let AMP produce a professional commercial for you, or get an opportunity to truly explain your business and its impact in an interview format. You could even reach our email list of Patriot subscribers. There are lots of options to engage with us. I'm offering free consultations to Patriot business owners for a limited time. So reach out today at the email below. Let's build that parallel economy together. Patriots supporting patriots.